My name is Umar. I'm unapologetically woke as f, and as of right now, I have absolutely nothing to lose. Let's rock.
The woke in our schools, the woke in our businesses, the woke in government agencies, woke, 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 woke.
Maybe it's just me, but I'm getting the impression that there are a lot of white conservatives that do not like the word woke. Why is that? Did woke ruin their day? And if it did, how? And the reasons why they don't like woke just sound so ridiculous to me. And maybe it makes perfect sense to them because it makes them sound kind of evil. No, not kind of evil. It makes them sound evil. It makes them sound like monsters. It makes them sound like the worst retrograde Cro-Magnons humanity could ever offer. And why? What is it about the word woke? Oh, should we go through the etymology of the word, considering there's only about 1 billion YouTube videos now that explains this out? It seems that every leftist who wants to address this opinion first has to address this long-ass history of a word. And I don't really have to address it because I'm black, I grew up in Brooklyn, and I was pretty clear on what woke was by the time I was around 7 or 8. It's a black thing. You understand, but we really wish you stopped co-opting it. So are these white conservatives wrong for being so offended by the word woke? You know, I did a TikTok with the word woke and just had the woke coming out of my mouth, and I was tempted to do it today, just have a white smoky woke come out my mouth, because I know that triggers right-wingers, and they're on a laundry list of monsters I just hate. But I want to try to have an honest discussion on why exactly these people are so offended by this word. Now, words are a funny thing. I am going to, at some point in my developing YouTube history, talk a lot about words. All kinds of words. The N word, the B word, spelling bees, words, period. I will speak words. You're going to get a sense that I have kind of a grasp on how language works. But I also understand that I'm limited because I speak American English. And even in England, where the language was invented, they look at how we speak English and go, huh? Now, my thing is history. I only understand words is because, you know, I did the whole school thing. And while the American school system is progressively awful, it did have its peaks and valleys where it actually tried to teach some of it. And I happened to go to school during the white guilt era. Yes, boys and girls, there was a white guilt era, and white people will never let us forget it at all. Sometimes you get a little delayed while you fix the mic. So let's continue on. What exactly offends the conservative party, especially about the word woke? Because I know how this is going to go, how it always goes. They come up with PC. Oh, the PC police. Oh, it's PC going mad. And all of a sudden, everybody's using PC their way. They come up with SJW. Oh my goodness, are you an SJW? And we smack our faces like we're the kid from Home Alone and go, SJW. And now we're using it as a pejorative. Why is a social justice warrior a pejorative? What is so bad about being a warrior for social justice? It sounds like it would make a great main character in a fantasy novel. But these are real life people trying to do real life things to make other real life people's lives better. And yet we mock it. And we don't mock it because when the idea of social justice came up, and we've had the idea of social justice since there's been civilization in one form or another, but every time it comes up, we mock it only because a bunch of people who have very bad ideas want to pass laws to take away rights from almost everybody that isn't white and male, say it's a bad thing. That's what Gamergate was made of, a bunch of petulant, fragile white people all pissed off because women and colored people were getting into their video games. And even then, we played this game of giving grace, and grace is going to be a big part of my topic on why the conservatives are so offended by woke, because we give them too much of it, and we do it in such backhanded ways we don't even notice it. Did you ever hear yourselves when you talk about the conservative party, the right wing? Have you listened to how you describe them? There's a whole chain of descriptions that lead up to, well, we've got to understand. I don't get why we have to understand. Do we have to understand serial killers? We most certainly should never understand pedophiles. Yet, we're supposed to understand a group of people whose entire cultural basis is the exploitation, degradation, and eventual murder of people who are not them. You want me to give grace to that. And you give grace to them by saying things that maybe you don't even notice how much grace it gives to them. For example, There was a case where a 50-year-old white girl, I don't know, she passed her driving test or something. Something made her, while she was driving in her car, get up on Snapchat and blatantly say the N-word. Now, I saw the video when the whole thing was being talked about because it's one of those cases of cancel culture that a lot of people who don't understand what the hell they're talking about try to convince me. Of course, cancel culture exists. What about this poor girl who lost her job in college? Youth becomes the first grace we give a right-wing personality. A personality that's going to grow up to be a Marjorie Taylor Greene or a Lauren Boebert. I remember this case clearly because I want to describe it because it kind of fits my entire theme. First, it came out she lost her college. It came out because they showed the teary-eyed, adorable white girl crying, I can't believe they took my college away. And then the backstory happened. Well, she was caught using the N-word. Well, that's not exactly what happened. But since we live in a culture that goes by headlines, and hey, I ain't knocking people who do the headline things. I do it too. There are certain times I read a headline, I don't think I have to read the story. Other times, maybe I should. It happens. But since we live in a headline culture, the first headline we got was, poor white girl can't go to the college she wants because they saw her on Snapchat using the N-word. And we was giving her grace without going to find out the entirety of the story. I won't mention this story again in my cancel culture absolutely positively in no way exists video. It's a long title, but I'm working on it. You see, the backstory of this poor white girl who lost her college was this. She had did a Snapchat when she was about 15 years old. At 17, which is only 2 years later, she was in some AP studies class with a group of other students. One was a biracial gentleman. And of course, being biracial, you can tell he had some black in him. She decided to pull up the Snapchat around her white buddies while they were all outside the classroom. And they were sitting there in a circle keying about it. Then they started spreading around like it was the funniest thing ever. He caught wind of it, the biracial student. He made a copy of the Snapchat and wrote to one of the colleges he knew she was in because she was probably bragging about it while she's in school. You know those types. When the young man explained to the college how he got wind of the video, what was going on, the college decided whether you did this at 15, you're 17 now, it doesn't seem like your behavior has changed. We don't want you coming to our school. And that's the story we didn't tell. Instead, we made the mistake, and everybody who tries to prove cancel culture is a real thing makes the mistake of giving grace by going, but she was only 15 when she did it. Yeah, and when she did the second thing that got her kicked out the other college, she was 17. That was only 2 years later. She knew what she was doing. But instead, this is supposed to be some trophy, some great feat. It was the Oscar Awards of cancel culture stories. Just like with the way the right wing is, we give immediate grace to what they were young. Well, I got news for you. 90% of the people that call themselves debate bros were young when they were gamergating. And by gamergating, I mean when they were participating in the harassment, the threatening, and the attacks against mostly women and people of color. But we give them grace by going, well, they were young back then. We want to give that immediate grace all the time. The very first thing we hit with is the young thing. Then comes the next one, the ignorant. My God, they were ignorant. How could they have possibly known better? What, are you kidding me? Ignorance is not an excuse to be evil. Ignorance is not an excuse to be a shithead. Ignorance is not an excuse to gain power and use that power to marginalize other people. And that is precisely what the right wing is doing at this very moment, passing bills and laws that marginalize people who are not white and who are not male. And the fact that they have women collaborators and people of color collaborators and black collaborators doesn't mean a damn thing. Because in the end, it ends up doing an evil that marginalizes people of color. But the ignorance grace is one we throw around. I remember I was told that my response to being called the N-word was to say, N-word is not really a word and it's just said by ignorant people. Well, exactly how are we defining ignorance? You're talking about a group of people who systematically wiped out the group of people who were here first. Then systematically went all the way to Africa, dragged a bunch of people here to work for them for free, brutalized, degraded, countless acts of sexual assault that continue to this day, lynchings and all kinds of terrible acts of torture and murder that would make the writer of Silence of the Lamb turn his stomach if he actually picked up a history book. Then they carved this area into territories they called states. Then they got mad at mommy and daddy from across the sea and says, hell no, we want to be our own thing now, threw their tea in the harbor and boom, became a country. I know that was an oversimplification, but it's just as good as George Washington chopped down a goddamn cherry tree, isn't it? And these people have been holding on to the power in this country since they turned it into a country. So their big year is 1776. In 1976, that was the celebration of the 200th year of this country's formation. It is now 2023. White people are still on top. Racism still exists. Misogyny is still a thing. Transphobia, homophobia is rampant all over the place. So I think for a bunch of ignorant people, they've been doing pretty good. How about you? Now, black people make the mistake of giving them grace with the education route. Well, if we're going to educate them, we're going to teach them about racism. I cannot begin to tell you how insane I think it is that black people think they're going to teach the perpetrators of an act about the act. And that goes in so many different directions. It's amazing. I remember every police murder case I marched in. When you went and caught the news and read the articles, they would say crap like, maybe it's because they live in an area where there are no black people. Okay, we need to stop that right now. Oh, come the fuck on. Okay, hold on. Do they live in this country? They are not aware that there are other people in this country? You mean during the entire slave trade, everybody else in the country, all the white folks who didn't live with black folks, were unaware that this country was filled with slaves at one point? This is something they had said about the cops who beat up Rodney King for 20 minutes in a video that every single channel, including the emerging cable channels, played over and over and over again. And one of the graces they gave them bunch of racist cops was, well, you know, they grew up in an area where there wasn't that many black people. There came a point where they started blaming hip-hop music and the hip-hop movies that hip-hop music makers started to make. Now, I got my problems with stuff like blaxploitation and that whole slew of shoot each other in the face movies, but I hardly think they were to blame for the group of white cops who beat a man for 20 minutes on video for no reason. But we give it grace. And this is what we do with the right wing too. Give them grace. Well, you know, they're mostly around white people. You know, they don't realize other human beings exist, so they don't have a reason to act like human beings. This is how y'all sound. So the education grace has got to stop. Plus, hey, black people, aren't you tired of teaching these people shit they should already know? Now, don't get me wrong. Or get me wrong. It's up to you. I understand that there's a sincere effort by a lot of white people to try to educate themselves into a higher state of mind. The problem that a lot of black people have is we've been there, done that. I love how these millennials and Gen Zers are calling themselves communists, and I realize they have not an inkling of an idea of the actual history of the Communist Party in this country. They think McCarthyism was conservatives overreacting, and it was conservatives overreacting, but there's a lot more to it than that. And I know you stumble over these explanations because I see you try to push back against the right wing's whole anti-CRT, anti-woke, anti-PC police agenda. And you act like you don't even understand the recent history of these things. So what exactly is the anti-woke argument? Let's start with that while we're trying to give these people grace for being monsters. First argument. You want us to learn history other than our white history. Yeah, because there's more history than yours, and most of your history is a lie. What's the next argument? I don't want to be called racist. That is an interesting one. It goes with the I don't want to be called misogynist argument too. That is so interesting. Okay, I want to be racist. I want to join the Klan. I want to attend a couple of lynchings. I want to degrade people. And if we get lucky, we get essays on black women. But I don't want you calling me racist, because you calling me racist makes me feel bad. Because I feel like when you call me racist for the racism I've done, that's just as bad as the racism I've done. Only your racism has led to the destruction of black property since we got here, the theft of black invention and talent, the 400 years of forced labor in your emerging country, which you refuse to pay us back for, and eventually murder. You see what color I am? I am not this color because one ancestor somewhere married a white chick. I am this color because throughout slavery, wherever slavery happened, there was sexual assault abound. You see black people who are light-skinned and dark and brown and cinnamon and coffee colored, and we assume the reasons is all these proposed relationships that might have happened. You know, everybody had a we will get married despite our racist story. No, everybody did not have that story. The actual fact is that black people should be just as we describe ourselves, black. We were under an African sun. That's where we grew our nations. That's where we developed math and science and all the things that white folks take credit for. Two things always came along with colonization and enslavement: murder and sexual assault. And the sexual assault was constant and frequent. And that is why black people across the world are so many shades. It is not because your great-great-granddaddy on your uncle's side was white. That has nothing to do with it. Now, you got to imagine what it takes to take a group of people that were universally black and beautiful and turn them into all these multitudes of shades, which are, while beautiful, is not our original state. But I guess that falls on the CRT, and that's one of those little lessons they don't want you to learn about. So when they say, we don't want you to call us racist for committing a racist, that is one of the racisms they don't want you to push back on them with. And the misogyny thing is just as bad. They are basically saying, hey, we want control of women's bodies. I mean, seriously, weren't women happier when men made all the decisions? And that basically boils down to, well, if you want women to have rights, you are woke. What? There's a woman, the head of a bank? Obviously, wokeism. You have a diversity initiative? Wokeism. The funny thing about it is Fox News makes that argument, and Fox News has an open diversity initiative. You can go to their websites and see. I love the way the right wing goes, yes, we want to be racist, but we want to be diverse. Sorry, guys, you only get about so many Candace Owens per generation. Just saying. So the anti-woke argument is, well, we want to be misogynist, we want to be racist, and we just don't want you calling us it. The right-wing conservative anti-woke argument is the living embodiment of Malcolm X's suffer peacefully speech. Because that's basically what they're saying. We want to be monsters, but you cannot complain about it. Because if you complain about it, that's just as bad as us being monsters. Listen to how police union heads in almost every city come out and defend cops for cold-blooded murder. What about the good we do? Yeah, we shot the guy, but your complaining is making us feel bad. That's an anti-woke argument. And which brings us to the next part of the whole anti-woke thing. As usual, the white leftists are completely surprised that the right wing is making an anti-woke argument, where black folks are like, we heard this before. The South wanting to keep slaves was an anti-woke argument. The invention of white to separate workers from forming unions by dividing by racial lines was an anti-woke argument. Jim Crow was an anti-woke argument. The KKK is an anti-woke organization. Lynching is the total expression of anti-wokeness. We will not have no equality in this country. Put them on a tree. We have been hearing the anti-woke crap forever. Lexio Media does a rundown of the history of the 70s. It's an awesome documentary. Within that documentary, she talks about a group of brothers. I believe they were called the Chicago Five. I'm doing this off the top of my head. If you want research, join my Patreon so I can afford to sit down and do some research. But these five brothers were framed for robbing a bank, and the police and the FBI bent over backwards to make sure the frame job was done. And they did such a shoddy job that everybody who talks about the history says them being accused of robbing a bank was a whole frame job. And what were these brothers guilty of? What did they do that offended the establishment so bad? They tried to bring a black studies curriculum into their local college, the college that they were involved with. We've been hearing the anti-woke, anti-SJW, anti-PC, anti-CRT forever. The only thing the right does is find a new word for it every once in a while when the old words stop working. Like, as they see that woke isn't the flex they think it is, they'll come up with something else, and they'll steal it from us, because every white person steals shit from black people. I mean, isn't Addison Rae about to become a movie star? And I'm like, wait a minute, isn't she famous for stealing black dancers and never getting any of the black people she stole the dancers from credit? I guess they can't accuse her of being woke, unless stealing the black dancers is a woke thing. I'm not sure how it works, but I guess it's a Animal Farm thing. Some woke is less woke than others or something like that. I don't know how it works. Philosophy isn't my thing. Now, I get in trouble because I say the conservative party are corrupt. These are evil people. These are not good people. They don't do anything that's good. Everything they do is for the cause of white supremacy, misogyny, homophobia. They want to drag the country backwards, back to a time when lynching was legal and women knew their place. And them gays stayed in a damn closet where they belong until we come visit them privately. That's pretty much the conservative credo. And that's evil. And then people go, well, you can't just call them evil. You might offend them. You think that I care about offending people who are offended already by the fact I exist? That's why I give them no grace. I am not against the Klansmen or the whoever who quits the shit and comes back and says, yo, what I was doing is wrong. Let me give you some receipts so we can bust these. I'm not against people who grew up white. It doesn't shock me that every white person had a racist stage. They grew up white. But they grew up and they're trying their best to get out of it, and they don't do it all perfectly. That's all well and good. That's that shade of gray you can have. That's that grace. But the difference here is they're trying. But at the same time, then there's people who are purposely like this. Proud Boys, Boogaloo Boys, the Jimmy Dores, the Shoe on Heads, the Debate Bros, they are purposely horrible people. They are right-wing from my observations, and they will not change their ways. They are not a solution. They are, in fact, a problem, and they follow the same credos and habits as the anti-woke. I wish I could group everybody into just anti-woke, but I know anti-woke is just a smokescreen for them to pass horrible bills because they're still sore that second Civil Rights Act was passed and Voting Rights Act was passed and Roe v. Wade, we cannot forget Roe v. Wade, and they're going to do everything in their power to tear all these things down. That is the right-wing credo. The right-wing, conservative, anti-woke credo wants people to go hungry and then punish them for being hungry. They don't want you complaining about your damn job. They just want you to work it and get another one. Get 3 if you have to, but pay your bills because we're going to give concessions to the banks and the landlords and the profiteers, the oil companies, and we're going to make sure they're taken care of. And when it comes to the people, screw you.
So you get nothing. You lose.
So when people go to me, well, what are you saying? If someone chooses to be GOP, you're against them. You're choosing a murderous, evil party. You've made your choice. You've told me who you are. But what about the black people and Latinos? Excuse me. Didn't I just say you're choosing a murderous, evil party? Because this argument has been going on for so long. It's like how they try to fool us into the Democrats sold slaves. That, in fact, is true. But at that time, the Democrats were the conservative anti-woke mob. Slave states were conservative anti-woke mobs. The conservative anti-woke mob, the conservative argument, the right-wing argument is always, we want to go back to the days when white people were in charge and everybody else was under us. Even though that wasn't exactly how it was, but we thought it was like that, so we want to go back to that. Make America great again. That's the anti-woke argument. So why would you give grace to these people? I watched a brother do a thing about the Debate Bros and he was bending over backwards to try to say, they're not that bad. Yes, they are. They are just another arm of the right wing, only a few of them pretend to be left. Even though I don't know how you're friends with Lauren Southern and then call yourself a leftist, but like I said, y'all fuck up so many words. I have a wealth of YouTube videos about words. We got to get back to the conservatives and why they hate woke so much. Well, what's another thing woke proposes? Let's treat everybody fairly. Does that not drive anybody who's right-wing nuts? They do not want to treat anyone fairly. Fuck that noise. Treat people fairly. That's against my constitutional rights. I'm not going to define but pretend I have. I mean, look at the argument on non-gender conforming people. How dare they call themselves something else besides he and she and it? What the fuck are you talking about? I remember that Neil deGrasse Tyson appeared on Ben Shapiro, another anti-woke, white supremacist, racist. And Ben Shapiro was trying his best to go, well, what about this gender thing? Oh, a men are men, a women are women. And Neil deGrasse Tyson was sitting there like, well, why do you care so hard? And guess what? This is the way society is going. There's nothing you can do about it. We have seen these things come before. Now, I have no clue why Neil deGrasse Tyson was on Ben Shapiro, because it couldn't have been for the clout. In terms of frame, Neil deGrasse Tyson's up here and Ben Shapiro's about here. Ben Shapiro is only known for being evil, for saying and doing bad things, for saying okay to white supremacy, which is really interesting because the last name is Shapiro. So he is catering to the very people who in 1936 Germany had something to say about his particular religious order. So once again, I'm going to ask, how are we giving grace to this? This is the type of arguments we're getting from these people. You want to give them the grace of ignorance or childhood, or maybe they just don't know, or maybe they lived among. No grace. Evil is evil. Sometimes things are black and white. Sometimes things are a binary. It is just that you have got to be cautious on what you're making a binary. A binary has to actually exist. Like, for instance, race. Race proposes one race is over other races for a plethora of reasons that, when taken one by one, makes absolutely no sense. Humans be humans, but humans can be good and humans can be evil. That is up to the individual human or the collective human. Sundown towns could claim there's some good white folks in there, but while you're living in the sundown town, you are down with the sundown. And sundown towns are particularly murderous to black people. So don't give me the, hey, Johnson gave to the NAACP, but listen to towns that'll lynch you if you come through after 6 o'clock. That makes Johnson part of things, because Johnson ain't in that town doing shit to change that. This is my basic problem with trying to give grace and listening to these ridiculous anti-woke arguments. I'm not listening to you. You want to murder me. I've got friends who are LGBTQ. You want them to stop existing. I have friends who are women. You want to subjugate them and turn especially the white ones into baby factories because of this weird myth that we're not not having enough babies. And Lord, whew, boy, sometimes you do a video and you come upon shit that's a whole video. That whole false notion of birth numbers is a whole ass video. But this is the mindset of the right-wing conservatives anti-woke is going for. The essential thing they want is white people on top, lies of white history told, and don't make white people uncomfortable. Yes, we are going to let our white cops murder you. Yes, we are going to lynch the fuck out of you. But don't complain, because complaining is bad, okay? How are we listening to these people? This is why I say these type of people deserve no grace. Their collaborators deserve no grace. When Stacey Dash found out that Candace Owens was replacing her and tried to do that comeback to our community, and we was like, hell no collectively, I was so proud of y'all, because that's how they should be treated. Stacey Dash was a grown woman when she chose during George Floyd to go on Fox News and say the horrible things she said. So now they're treating her like one of us, and we're supposed to feel bad for her. Hey, you made that bed, sleep in it. We damn sure do not need to be giving any kind of grace or excuses to a bunch of people who are creating policies that are basically saying it's okay to attack, to assault, and to murder people. That is what they're setting up. That is what a fascist state is. You think capitalism is bad? Yo, capitalism is a picnic compared to a fascist state. These people are making the choice to be anti-woke. These people are making the choices to try to heap more degradation on marginalized people for no other reason than they're tired of us complaining. This is why I say you can't give grace to these kind of people. You got to call it for what it is. The right-wing, conservative, anti-woke people, all of them are monsters. They are the purest example of evil you can come up with. But what about the innocent Republicans? I haven't met one. I haven't seen the good Republicans push back against this nonsense and do anything successful to stop it. More and more, they're making laws, they're passing bills that are eroding our freedoms, while they complain about us not giving them freedom. And the freedoms they're saying we're taking away from them is their freedoms to be awful people. What the hell is that? I think it's about time that we start treating the anti-woke, the right wing, the conservatives, for exactly what they are, a party of evil, and we've got to stop pretending they're anything else. Anti-wokeism is an evil agenda, period. To quote Stan Lee, enough said.